For we are opposed around the world by a monolithic and ruthless conspiracy that relies primarily on covert means for expanding its sphere of influence, on guerrillas by night instead of armies by day. On infiltration instead of invasion, on subversion instead of elections.
If I were the devil, I'd take from those who have and give to those who want it until I had killed the incentive of the ambitious.
Violence and vandalism is being led by Antifa and other radical left-wing groups who are terrorizing the innocent, destroying jobs, hurting businesses, and burning down buildings. They are coming after me because I am fighting for you. That's what's happening.
Greetings, fellow thought criminals, and thank you for joining the insurrection. I'm Michael Lauber, and today I'm joined by Andrew Moeller, host of American Made, which you can find here Saturdays, right here on X America News. How you doing this morning, Andrew?
Doing better than I deserve, Michael. Great to be with you.
Oh, great to have you. And you know who's not doing too well right now? Most of the Democrat Party. They are now having a major freak out and making demands that that networks don't carry Trump's speech on Thursday, since at least part of it is going to be targeting election interference. AOC demands networks censor Trump's upcoming speech on free and fair elections, claims ethical obligation not to air lies about our elections. Well, I guess really like the crux of this matter actually goes back to a story that we covered yesterday, but another leak. Someone at the White House leaks election investigation information to slimy MS Now so they can frame the narrative. Steve Bannon goes off. So what we've heard so far, and I have, obviously, both Andrew and I used to work with Mike Lindell over there, so I still have a lot of connections to a lot of the people that have been investigating election integrity. So I've been told from a very reliable source that, this has also been leaked out by other media outlets, other people out there. I'm not necessarily leaked, I guess I should say reported and leaked, that a big part of this speech is going to be focusing on a few different things. That confirmation of foreign interference in the election in 2020. Now, I don't know for sure if this is going to be Venezuela or if it's going to be another story we're going to touch on here shortly, or what the confirmation is going to be. But it's also going to be kind of reiterating to the American people now that we know for a fact there's not enough ballots in Fulton County, Georgia, to justify the results there, that they were short over 30,000 ballots. They just straight up don't exist. We also just found out, we covered it last week, in Michigan, they're short 26,000 ballots in Detroit. And again, we're just talking like one county in both these instances. There's also the 30,000 mystery ballots in Arizona that showed up somewhere between when they went into the center in Maricopa County and then went out to Runbeck Systems to be counted. Just 30,000 extra ballots materialized, and that's just 3 states. We know they've also been looking into things in Pennsylvania. We know that they are looking into results out of Wisconsin, which, again, remember, they have same-day voter registration in Wisconsin. You can walk up on Election Day, register to vote right there, and they'll count your ballot. It's like this is going to be a big deal, especially, again, if we're offering concrete proof. We've reported on here numerous times that there are 80-plus indictments down in Fulton County, Georgia, for election fraud and activities related to that. I think it's time for the FBI to start making some arrests there, and in Arizona and in Michigan. All these states that shut down counting in the middle of the night at 2, 3 a.m. And then suddenly when they came back up the next day, wouldn't you know it, every one of them just reversed, and all of a sudden Trump was losing. This whole myth of the red mirage, as the media keeps calling it, like, it just doesn't add up. It doesn't make sense, especially, again, when you have all these ballots that come in so far it's so many standard deviations away from normal. It's not possible. And I think California recently just really pins a bow on it. I mean, these results are impossible. That somehow people submitting ballots late, and again, we're talking some that show up a week later, which again, I don't think that's possible to begin with, not with legitimate ballots. Um, that they have a totally different voting pattern than people that voted, including by mail, prior to election day. It's just not possible.
No, absolutely. And I do want to say, this is the sort of Trump we've been waiting to see. Of course, the speech and the contents of it, the delivery, the findings are yet to be seen. But this
Yeah.
is what we've been calling for, right? Is Trump to come before the American people, Trump to come before the other branches of government and make a case, make an argument about election integrity and election fraud, about the mass, migration issues, about the affordability crisis, about the national debt. Excuse me. So this is exactly what I've personally been wanting Donald Trump to do for a very long time, is to
Yep.
take issues domestically, not necessarily always foreign, but issues domestically that
Yeah.
are hurting the American people and make a case, reveal some stuff, make something happen. Let's have some motion. Let's get some grease on the wheels. And I think that this is going to be that, especially when you have people like AOC coming out and saying, "Hey, let's censor this. Let's, not allow the speech to take place." Of course, that's ridiculous. Not going to happen. Just more of a political talking point for her to be able to go on MS Now and CBS and a CNN to be able to get a interview slot. But the freak out is, I think, legitimate
Yep.
because all of these issues do come back to election fraud. So hopefully, President Trump is going to drop some massive bombshells. I can't imagine he would make a speech and drop it and tease it like this if there weren't. A lot of people are talking about John Ossoff and Raphael
Yes.
Warnock and their Senate seats and the validity of those elections. Of course, Georgia has become perhaps the biggest swing state when you think in terms of the electoral college and presidential elections.
Hmm.
Pennsylvania used to be one. Ohio used to be discussed a little bit more, or Iowa, excuse me, used to be discussed a little bit more and things like that. But it's really shifted a lot of attention to Georgia. So if Trump has some, let's just say, bombshell information proving that Warnock and/or Ossoff were, illegitimately elected,
Yeah.
that could be huge, especially when you're looking at a political landscape where the SAVE Act's trying to pass. You have individuals going against it. I understand. I think Randy Fine voted against it, so he's revealing his
Yeah.
true colors there. But
Yep.
yeah, I'm looking forward to this with great anticipation, and hopefully it will result in some action too. Because again, I just want to come out and say this because I think it's important. If Trump drops a bombshell on Thursday night, tomorrow night, and it's not followed by immediate congressional action, resulting in an end to whatever's revealed, it's pointless. So
Yep.
Congress needs to be, keyed up, ready, finger on the button, right? Finger on the Diet Coke button, ready to push it to be able to, fix our elections.
Yeah, well, and I think this is putting it squarely on them. Now, we do need law enforcement to act as well. We need these 80 plus arrests in Georgia and other states where they've been already conducting investigations, where they've either had to raid warehouses and seize the ballots, like in Georgia, or in even in Arizona, where under threat of warrant, they did eventually hand over ballots and hand over information. We haven't heard as much about what's developed there, but we still know these 30,000 mystery ballots were in the count, and there's not been an explanation of where they showed up from. They just they were not in the count in Maricopa County. Then suddenly, when it shows up at Runbeck, there's 30,000 extra ballots. But yeah, I think the other picture too. What we've heard from the White House was that the two senators from Georgia were both illegitimately elected. That they were installed. They were selected, not elected. And I would tend to agree with that, because I even remember, like, part of it, the excuse that we got was, oh, well, people were disheartened, so they didn't show up to vote in the special election for these seats, after Trump's loss in 2020. And there's probably some limited truth to that, especially, again, because a lot of people, it was pretty obvious that shenanigans had gone on in Georgia in multiple counties between the water pipe lie. They lied, said there was a water pipe broke, and that's why they had to shut down counting. And then a few days or maybe a week later, I can't really remember off the top of my head, they said, okay, well, no, there was no water pipe leak. We were just sleepy. We had to go home for the night. Oh wait, no, and which again, once observers were kicked out, we had video of them scanning, continuing to scan ballots, pulling duffel bags out from under tables, scanning some of those ballots multiple times. Like we know a lot of this stuff went on. You know, the Democrats and the media continue to pretend, oh well, these are just small, isolated incidents. They definitely didn't affect, statewide outcomes. Maybe like in Hamtramck, Michigan, or this other case recently in New Jersey, and there's another one in New York that's being investigated. I think there's another one in Wisconsin too. That we've had small scale fraud with ballot stuffing here and there, or then I think in New Jersey it was them destroying ballots to make sure their candidate won, or that person that was responsible for it, make sure they kept their seat on I think it was city council. And sorry guys, I'm confusing details on a couple of these cases. They pretend, oh, okay, these are all small scale, maybe a few hundred ballots here and there, definitely not enough to affect national elections. But we have concrete proof now, like it tens of thousands of ballots don't exist that were included in the counts, or 26,000 in the case of Michigan that have no verification, no anything. From what I understand, every one of these ballots is an exact duplicate of the other ones in this 26,000 that were missing the mail-in ballot envelopes, don't have proper documentation or chain of custody. And that's the thing, is we know a bunch of these were inserted. And actually, I'll just go ahead and pull this next story too, and then get your response here. Because this is some confirmation of foreign interference. Chris Wray and Chris Krebs lied. They knew Iranians breached U.S. election system in 2020, stole 100,000 identities, and then posted video online of stolen data being used to create UACAVA ballots, and hid this from American people. And this is another form of election fraud nationwide that I don't think's gotten enough attention. So the UACAVA ballots and then the U.S. serviceman ballots in a lot of areas, these come in electronically through email, and they don't appear to reflect reality. Like you had places, I'm trying to remember what city it was now. Might have been Chicago, that had, so these ballots, when they come in, a lot of them from U.S. servicemen, people like that, which again tend to lean Republican. But you'd have batches of thousands and thousands of ballots come in that were all voting for Joe Biden, which doesn't align with reality. Now, again, for him to have taken like maybe a larger share than normal of the military ballot just because of frustration in 2020 from COVID or whatever, that's maybe believable. When you have thousands of ballots with like 4 votes for Trump, like again, something doesn't add up there. And again, here's proof that they hid from the American people of 100,000 identities that were stolen, that were then used to create fictitious UACAVA ballots that were assumedly counted in the election across all states. And again, small pockets here and there may have not, like the Democrats and the media say, may not have been enough to flip things on their own. But when you put all these things together, that's how you end up with a stolen election. And that's why they don't want an investigation, and certainly don't want Trump to get access to the American people to tell his story directly to the public and present this evidence. And again, like you said, demand Congress do something, and demand the DOJ and law enforcement do something about it.
Exactly. And I heard this illustration the other day be given, and I thought it was very appropriate. If you had a prestigious university like Harvard, and you had doctors who were going to Harvard and they were going to become very specific surgeons, and obviously their training and the effectiveness of that training would result in either the success of countless patients going on to live good lives, or being harmed,
Yeah.
and yet the medical tests to make sure there's those practitioners, those doctors are well trained, were submitted. The results of the tests and the tests themselves were submitted through an anonymous drop box that was not surveilled, that had no authentication, and it was open 24/7. You could have smart, brilliant people who are busy, maybe they're busy partying, whatever, contracted out to some other kid, and it's all anonymous. There's no authentication, there's no ID, the
hmm
submission lines open all the time. They could just have somebody else fill out their test and submit it in the anonymous, non-verified Dropbox. Now,
Yeah.
anyone would look at that and say that's ridiculous, right? That is going to encourage cheating. That's going to encourage people to not actually go through with their medical license at Harvard and their
Yeah.
education, and look at the consequences of that. Now, take that scenario and make it 1,000 times more significant, or 10,000 times more significant, because we're talking about the future of our country, the future
Yeah.
of Western civilization. And that's what we're doing with these elections, is we're allowing, these mail-in ballots, these digital ballots, these absentee ballots to flood in with virtually little restrictions
Yeah.
whatsoever. And these are people casting votes for offices in our land that are going to determine our future. It's unacceptable. And that is why, these sorts of measures that, the president is pushing, I think are necessary. Obviously, I'd like to see it done at the state level too, but this is the future of securing our country. And unless and until we fix this, like election integrity and the education of our youth, those are two of the biggest issues. You could throw immigration
Yes.
in there if you wanted a third. But if you want to talk about stopping the hemorrhaging, stopping the bleeding so that the country can actually start to heal, you have to address these issues. And unless and until we do that, the rest of it's futile. And the daylight savings thing. Did anyone see this? Anyone paying attention
Yes.
to daylight savings? So we have the House pass a bill yesterday saying that they're going to freeze daylight savings. And you have every congressman and their dog hop on X after years of tireless parents begging for daylight savings to be, a product of yesteryear. Congress officially did it. We got it done. We brought home the bacon. We brought you the victory. America first. Daylight savings is a thing of the past. And yet we have 20 plus million illegal immigrants, a national debt of over $40 trillion, all this stuff. And they're talking about daylight savings. Now, let me be clear. I understand politics isn't that simple and that takes time. You have to build coalitions. And if it's an easy win to just get through a daylight savings package, boost morale, call a win a win, I get it. Got it. You don't have to, all the Trumpers, you don't have to tell me all that and, shame me. But I do think it's ironic. That, on the eve of a SAVE Act vote, when, the president's going to be speaking tomorrow night about all this stuff, instead of making an attempt, right, to push through the SAVE Act, or instead of making an attempt to do something significant with the Department of Education, the United Nations, or anything like that, it's daylight savings. So that's the state of Congress, in case anyone was curious.
Yeah, what kills me with that too, and we're going to get to this later. We'll just discuss it now. Is like it's such a superficial,
like the cat out of the bag.
No, you're fine because again, I like the comparison you're making. Like this is such a superficial nonsense, nothing. Like people bitch and whine about it, and it is a pain in the butt to have the clock change twice a year, and everybody's tired. Or I gets to sleep in, or you don't get to see the sun for 3 months, or whatever. Like it's annoying, but like they've literally been talking about doing away with this since like the night. I can't remember if it's like the late 60s or early 70s. But I saw an article written up about this because remember a few years ago they talked about this too while Biden was in office, and they couldn't get the votes even for something like this simple that you would think. Could there possibly be like political differences on this between the parties? Like, what would be the politics of daylight savings time? You would think this would just be a purely common sense. Like, if anything was, and even then they couldn't do it. They couldn't build coalitions. It's insane. But hey, I guess they did finally do it. So good on that. But it's not like this isn't like a major.
Senate will pass it. The Senate has to pass it, and they're having trouble with it.
Yeah, well, we'll wait and see if John Fetterman joins the coalition to end it, and maybe I don't know, maybe we'll even get oh, I just blanked out. I'm lost name. Maybe maybe we'll get Susan Collins. Maybe we'll get Chuck Schumer. Maybe Chuck Schumer will cross the aisle and be like, guys, we need to come together on this and finally end the oppression of daylight savings times, especially since, women and minorities are hardest hit by time changes. We'll come up with some and then they'll put a rider on for that, for compensation for years of abuse under daylight savings time, because that's what they would do. They would need reparations for that. And again, something simple will just be bastardized into something nobody asked for or wanted.
And there were all these serious tweets. One last thing on this. There are all these serious tweets going around about it and how, they're fighting in the House and there's a struggle in the Senate. And I reposted it and I said, it's about time. Because it's about time. The bill is about time. But anyway, go on. I'm sorry, Michael.
Nice little one-liner there. Yeah. But again, like it's something so silly and stupid, and they celebrate it like this is a massive victory. If this just came up, like people finally started whining about it 3 months, and we got it done now, I'd say, okay, I guess you guys got something. You listened to the American people, and you did something for once. But to take it back to the SAVE Act and our next story here, this is again something with 85 to 87% broad support. Even liberal polls show that a majority of Democrats want the SAVE Act passed. But we can't do that, even though, again, what other issue can you think of that has like 85 to 87% support across the country? I mean, we can't even get the left to agree to put murderers in jail. But we've got a majority support on passing the SAVE Act, but Thune and them refuse to ask. But GOP hardliners lift U.S. House blockade, but challenges still remain. So this is basically what Anna Paulina Luna and a few others have been pushing, attaching it to spending bills and pushing it through because then it lays it on Thune's feet. House GOP weds SAVE Act to key funding bill, unshouldering burden of success onto Thune and company. Again, I think we covered this other story. I think it was Friday, or it might have been last week. That technically, J.D. Vance has the ability. He is the president of the Senate. He can fire the parliamentarian. This was done 51 years ago too, and I don't think the article actually mentioned why. But same thing. The parliamentarian was interfering with bills, taking things apart. They'd advised on it numerous times, and eventually they fired him because he was basically just blocking an effort that both bodies in Congress agreed upon. So the VP stepped in and got rid of him. It's time for that. If that's going to be the excuse that Thune uses, I can't get the votes, the parliamentarian won't allow it. Well, you know what? It's time to use your power and get rid of this person. She's obviously dishonest and inconsistent. She's allowed things, and when it served the Democrats and the Uniparty, that should not have been allowed into a bill, but then takes this hardline approach to the SAVE Act or anything else.
Right. Yeah, it's absolutely preposterous. And, I was thinking last night while I was in the shower about this interview that no one paid attention to whatsoever, but it was so poignant, and I'm going to find it today. I'm going to go find it today because I'm going to clip it. But it was Michael Knowles talking with Mike Johnson. And this was right around the time the Iran war was starting. And Michael Knowles is talking to Johnson about disenfranchised GOP voters. And he's like, hey, and Michael Knowles asked a great question to his credit. He said, the elections aren't secure. There's a lot of issues at home, affordability, on down the list. Why is Congress sitting on its laurels doing nothing in a midterm election season that matters a lot? And instead of focusing on these issues at home, and the SAVE Act would fit into that, right? You're focusing on all this stuff that doesn't even apply to the top 10 political or top 5 political issues of the day. And Johnson responded with a candidness that I can't even believe came out of his mouth. He said, don't worry, Michael. Americans have very short-term memory, and they're not going to remember what we did or didn't do. And by the time the election day rolls around, people are just going to vote Republican because of Trump. So it was basically, the message was, don't pay attention to what we do in Congress. It doesn't matter if we pass this stuff. It doesn't matter if we get these things done. People are dumb. That was Mike Johnson's message. And unfortunately, he's kind of right. But that's what they're doing. Is Mike Johnson is a part of a uni-party apparatus. Senator Thune is a part of a uni-party apparatus where the whole objective of their game that they're playing is keeping and maintaining power for their clique, their side of the deep state. And they don't care if Democrats win in the midterms as much. They don't care. If that's the price to pay, they would rather have Democrats win in the midterms than do something effective and actually move the needle for the country, because their whole grift is keeping the deep state, the spending machine, the big banks, the military industrial complex, big pharmaceutical companies, big ag, all that stuff in their pockets. And there's not that much of a difference between Ted Cruz and Lindsey Graham and Chuck Schumer and, John Fetterman, right? Their words are different. Their speeches are different. Their social media accounts look different. But ideologically, when it comes down to votes, when it comes down to foreign policy, when it comes down to the size and scope of government, when it comes down to omnibus bills, when it comes to spending packages, there's not that much of a difference, right? Okay.
No,
so that is what we're dealing with. And Mike Johnson and John Thune are banking on, as he said in the interview with Michael Knowles, you being dumb. So don't be dumb. Don't have a short-term memory.
Yeah. Well, I think this is one of the things that they are starting to fear, especially as the midterms grow closer. And as we keep saying on here, voter turnout's been low from the GOP because they are sick and tired of Congress not doing what they ran on, or even worse, blocking things like this that all of us clearly want. Now, you know, it's true that there's no difference between the two. The uniparty uh, you know, undocumented Democrats, these trans Republicans that pretend to be on our side, but then don't do anything, and the Democrat Party. They are the same. They may say slightly different things, but it's the same goal. It's preserving their empire, and that's in almost all cases against both the will and the well-being of the American people. But when you have a strong ally in the media to do your propaganda, your messaging work for you, create your narrative, it's hard to overcome this. But yeah, we can't forget a lot of these people do need to be punished and driven out of office. We really, in 2028, need to focus on primarying a lot of these useless rhinos out of there and getting in people that really will fight. And this is, I guess, tie this to something else, with Lindsey Graham's death and then appointing his sister in place. Like, now is the time for victory. I don't know anything about Lindsey Graham's sister, not enough to matter, at least. But, is she basically just going to, is she going to vote for the American people, or is she going to vote for the Uniparty? And I think the answer is she's probably going to vote for the Uniparty, except for maybe on, one or two issues where Lindsey Graham just so happened to be in alignment with the American people.
Right.
And that's my real concern. I want somebody like a Mark Lynch or somebody that's an actual fighter in that seat. Especially long term. We really need to be asking the same question with Mitch McConnell. I don't think he's made any of these 20-minute phone calls. Like I said before, I don't think anybody's talked to Mitch McConnell since he's been in the hospital, unless it was on a Ouija board, because I'm pretty sure he's brain dead. Normally I wouldn't be saying that a Hill report was credible, but I feel like the writer has been insistent that he spoke with several of McConnell's aide, hospital staff, and other people, and they all told him the same thing, that he was deprived of oxygen for a long time and now has no brain activity. When you're posting a photo from 2023 trying to pretend this is Mitch the Glitch recovering in the hospital, and then people figure out, oh, you guys just digitally altered a few things in an old picture. Mitch McConnell hasn't looked that good in 3 years. That's probably the last good picture he has of himself. I just don't buy it, and I'm sick and tired of this nonsense from both sides of the aisle.
Yeah, so true. And I do want to say something about Lindsey Graham, because I don't think I've respected or thought a good thought about Lindsey Graham since 2018, I think it was, when he defended Brett Kavanaugh in the Senate advice and consent hearings, which, by the way, was a great moment. Like, we have to admit, that was a great moment.
He's had a few here and there.
He's had a few, right? Broken clocks, right? A couple times a day. A blind squirrel stumbles into a nut in the park every once in a while. Like, these are not impossibilities. But, understanding that, I do think it's telling, and this is going to make some people's eyes roll, but that's okay. I do think it's telling that in this online soup we live in of X and Facebook and forums and, article comment sections, that when somebody gets killed or dies of natural causes, whatever it is, jury's still out, that you have people celebrating his death. Nick Fuentes posting good riddance, Anna Kasparian from the Young Turks posting good riddance, all these different things. Like, this is a guy I disagreed with on 90% of the issues. He was a neocon uniparty war hawk who was a grifter, who never followed the Constitution, at like a 50% voting score in accordance to the Constitution through the New Americans Freedom Index at best. This was somebody I don't agree with, but it really bugged me when people were like, spitting on his grave, saying good riddance, this, that, and the other. And then you had another group, which bugged me equally as much, where these are so-called based right-wing commentators saying, you know what, Lindsey Graham, they don't make him like they used to. Maybe you disagreed with him, but he was a patriot. He loved this country. They don't make him like they used to. He's actually really based. We're going to miss him. He's irreplaceable, this, that, and the other. And I'm looking at these two responses, right? Both of which I think are very troubled, right? Like, good riddance, spit on his grave, I hope you burn in rotten hell, versus You know what? They don't make him like they used to. You know what? We might have disagreed, but Lindsey Graham, he should have been in there. He's one of the greatest politicians of the century. Like, none of those are true. Like, why can't we have an American populace that says, you know what? Respectfully, I mourn Lindsey Graham's death. I feel, tragic for his family. Obviously, he was a public servant, and no one should celebrate his death. But he was kind of a piece of trash when it came to politics, and I disagreed with him vehemently. Like, why can't we have more responses like that? Why does it have to be constant glazing and grifting when somebody dies, or constant, celebration and just dirt bagging once they're gone? Like, I just, that really bugged me, those two things, and especially in a post Charlie Kirk world where political deaths are like chess pieces, it feels like. You know what I mean? Does anybody else feel that? Where these political deaths are like little chess pieces that are being used to push certain narratives or viewpoints. I just don't think it's healthy for the soul of the nation. I think there was a better balance that could have been struck. I ended up not saying too much publicly about it just because of the way I felt, but those were some of my thoughts on it.
Yeah, and actually, you know what? I decided I'm going to go ahead and play this clip. I've been sitting on this for a few days now. Just a quick reminder of who Lindsey Graham has been and has been to the right. Because, I know that more recently he's come around on a few issues, coming out in support of the SAVE Act and other things. But, let's remember, this guy was flying off to Ukraine to try to get them more money. All the horrible things he said about Trump and the January 6thers back in 2020 and beyond. Like you said, I think, and that's kind of what I tried to do on Monday. I didn't want to go then saying anything negative about him, especially after he just passed. But obviously, I've been saying for years, Lady Grahamnesty needs to go.
Right.
I mean, again, and it's not like this is a recent development. I mean, this guy was pushing amnesty when Rush Limbaugh was still alive. That's you calling me a Lindsey Grahamnesty because he cared more about illegal aliens than his own constituents. This guy was no great warrior for freedom like they're trying to pretend now. No constitutional scholar or anything.
Not even close.
Well, and if anything, he knew how to reach across the aisle and work with the Democrats. Yeah, he knew how to give it away, give them what they wanted, and we got almost nothing in return. And this is why we need somebody, again, especially from a conservative state like South Carolina, we need somebody that can really represent us, represent our values, and move America down that path. So I'm going to play this real quick, then we'll get your response, and we'll get back on track.
Talk to Trump supporters for a minute. I don't know who you are, and I don't know why you like this guy. He's a race-baiting, xenophobic, religious bigot. He doesn't represent my party. He doesn't represent the values that the men and women who wear the uniform are fighting for. I think he's a kook. I think he's crazy. I think he's unfit for office. And I'm a Republican, and he's not. He's not a conservative Republican. He's an opportunist. He's not fit to be president of the United States. He's disparaged women. He has an 80% disapproval rating among Hispanics. At the end of the day, he would be the most flawed nominee in the history of the Republican Party. He accuses most illegal immigrants of being rapists and drug dealers. He plays into the idea that maybe Obama is a Muslim. 70% of us in South Carolina believe that Donald Trump is not a conservative Republican. We think that he's unfit for office, that he would be a terrible commander-in-chief. He doesn't have the temperament or judgment. I think Donald Trump is a political car wreck, and people slow down and look at the wreck, but they eventually move on.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, they never moved on, Lindsey. But there's a line in there that's telling. He's not a true conservative Republican. He's an opportunist. That's what Lindsey Graham was, right?
Very revealing.
The second Trump won, Lindsey Graham was absolutely going in his favor. And honestly, the same with Trump. Trump did not like Lindsey Graham. He said he was horrible. He doxed his phone number. He called him all these names. And then Trump's like, oh, what a patriot, oh, Lindsey Graham, all these different things, glazing him. So it's one of those things where, and I like that one commentator put it, people posting Lindsey Graham's irreplaceable. It's no, he's literally the most replaceable senator because he literally just does whatever the majority of the party tells him to do.
Yeah. Yeah, and again, this goes back to why we need real fighters and people that will make the case, because it's not always easy. Sometimes you do need to explain to the voters why they should support something or be against an issue. You can't just blow in the wind. But I don't want to continue going after him too much. But Yeah, I think you're exactly right. Like these people that were dancing on his grave and saying, good riddance and all that, they need to go. But same with like these, real conservative voices that were suddenly glazing him afterwards. Like again, just you don't have to say anything mean. You can be quiet for a little while for even if it's just for the benefit of his family or whoever else. But at the end of the day, this guy was no conservative icon or even statesman that should be held up upon high. Like you said, he was never Trump in 2016, and then 2020 once he lost the election, it came back out again. But then suddenly, I guess they got to be good friends in the last few years, and now he was always by his side. But again, is this an honest conversion or political opportunism? And I think when he's flying off to Ukraine to essentially negotiate on their behalf, that's not America first. That's not putting our values ahead of things. And I am tired of all the spending to Ukraine, to Israel, to all these foreign countries. It all needs to end. We need to focus on ourselves here. We need to remove the plank from our own eye before worrying about the splinter in our neighbors. And, again, like I have no problem. If there's an emergency, like in Venezuela after this earthquake, we can send down some rescue workers. We can help them out. That's the humanitarian thing to do. However, we don't need to be funding playgrounds and schools and malls and soccer fields and whatever else around the world, or sponsoring, drag shows and Pango or any of this other nonsense. We got to stop spending the money where around the world, just throwing away. I saw somebody post something on Twitter a few weeks ago that's really stuck with me, and it's if your government is giving your money to foreign nations, then you're paying too much in taxes, and I think that's exactly right. That it is time to trim back all the fat at the federal level and the state level, for that matter. But we need to get them back into alignment and only doing the things that are within their constitutional authority to do. And we just need to straight up end a lot of these programs at the federal level and reduce the tax burden on the American people once and for all.
Yes, 100%. Couldn't agree more.
Yeah. Well, let's get back to unbelievable nonsense in D.C. Breaking news, Grassley reveals Jack Smith spied on 44 members of Congress, actually read their text messages and lied under oath about it. Well, you know what, Chuck? Maybe it's time that we send this over to the DOJ, a criminal referral. And DOJ, maybe it's time to start making some arrests. I mean, you guys are still sitting on either 19 or 20, I can't remember which, criminal referrals from Congress over various people that lied under oath, presented false testimony, presented false evidence, and a variety of other crimes, contempt of Congress, and not one of them has been arrested. But hey, guys, it's either 9 or 10 times now that you've told us that there's an investigation going on. Oh, guys, there's even a grand jury looking into Barack Obama. Yeah, well, I'll believe it when I see it, but I'm sick and tired of hearing about it. It's time for results.
Yep. Well, and this whole idea of, the deep state or whoever it is, wiretapping Congress, it always cracks me up when they release these things and act like it's a big surprise. There was another big news story a few weeks ago that was completely ignored. Klaus Schwab, the former president of the World Economic Forum, made a big statement saying that he found listening and hearing devices in his office, and he was just appalled. And I'm like, what in the world? Like, you guys are surprised you're being spied on? You guys are surprised that this is happening to you?
And they want to spy on and look at all our transactions and everything else.
Exactly.
But it happens to them. It's a totally different game. They're above that, Andrew. Didn't you know that?
Yeah, so you can, if you push back against flock cameras, or you push back against Palantir or Pegasus or any of these, big AI brain surveillance systems, you're a domestic terrorist, you're against solving crime, you're against national security, and you are a threat to democracy. But then these folks are spied on by their own clique, and they're like, holy smokes, this is a total violation of privacy. This is un-American. This must come to an end. And that is the hypocrisy. It's so incredible. Just like it's a hypocrisy when, the left says, hey, if you are a heritage American, you're a colonizer on stolen land. But if you were born here, you're a true American. But if you're born here as an illegal immigrant, you're a true American.
Yeah, then you're a citizen.
It's all hypocritical. It's, rules for them, but not for us.
It's mentally ill. I mean,
Yeah,
that's the
it's
problem. It's so
gaslighting, it's emotional manipulation.
yeah, you know, Klaus Schwab and the WEF, specifically wanted to spy on every person, know every transaction they made, and if you were eating too much meat, they were going to cut down on your ability to travel. And like this is
Right.
from their own mouth, so they wanted to know everything you did, where you went, what you posted online. They wanted all this tracked. But the minute somebody puts a camera or a listening device into their private space, like whoa, 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 I can't be spied on. I can't be monitored. I mean, again, the hypocrisy is just unbelievable. And the fact that, again, our media ignores that angle, instead presents the Klaus Schwab version to stories like this. Like, our
Right.
world leaders are under attack. They're being spied on. We got to figure out who's doing this. Um, Again, upside down and backwards. This is so out of touch. And again, this isn't the first time, even with Arctic frost. Remember, Lindsey Graham specifically wanted this $500,000 minimum per incident for senators and whoever that were spied on. Automatic payouts, essentially. But they don't want to give that same ability to the other Americans that were wrapped up in Arctic frost and also illegally spied on. Again, they want the protections, they want the easy path to victory, but they don't want to extend that same help out to regular, everyday, actual Americans, not the elite aristocracy.
Yes, exactly. And that's why it's so important that we elect people who are normal, like
Yeah,
actual normal American citizens, not hedge fund managers or, Nepo babies or things like that. Like sometimes there's a time and a place for those people. You can have some that break out, like RFK Jr. would be a prime example of that. But, for the most part, I just want a Congress of like Tim Burchett's, right? Like
yeah,
these guys who are just like in their little space in Tennessee in some barn making skateboards, like wearing Carhartt jackets. Like I want normal people, some guy who's been into a Circle K, who knows the cost of like a Slurpee, somebody like that to go in rather than these just completely out of touch, aristocratic, bureaucrats who act like they know what normal life is.
yeah,
When the state fair comes around and it's election season, they'll get a crisp new plaid shirt. They'll get nice new Levi 505s. They'll tuck it in. They'll get the cowboy boots. First time ever breaking any of that in. They'll roll up the sleeves and they'll start working the griddle at the state fair because they're just one of us, right? Like those are
yeah.
the people we need to ignore and instead get people like Tim Burchett, people like Matt Gaetz, people like Marjorie Taylor Greene, who actually had lives and businesses and normalcy and decide to get involved in government.
Yeah, exactly. I'm sick of these blue-blooded lizard people running everything, and I don't mean that they're literally space
Right.
lizards, but
Right.
something's definitely not right with them. But who knows? Maybe they are space lizards. That maybe that'll be the next speech we get from Trump. I don't know about you, but I think Amy Coney Barrett is compromised. I think this threat from left-wing terrorism, directly on her, it has changed how she votes. Maybe it's other blackmail, I don't know. But Amy Coney Barrett says she wore bulletproof vest after Dobbs leak as SCOTUS seeks more security. In the same thing, she talked about how this affected her kids and everything else. And, she's not the only one. And again, the message was being sent during all this. They were letting people protest in front of their houses. And the DOJ, Merrick Garland, refused to do anything about it. He wanted them terrorized. And that's even after that, whatever that weirdo's name was that flew out from California to try to kill Kavanaugh. But luckily he was so mentally ill, he turned himself in before it happened. But I do think a message was sent, and this is why we're getting a lot of the votes we are out of some of the weaker, supposedly conservative members of the court. What are your thoughts on this, Andrew?
100%. Amy Coney Barrett's not who we thought she was. Obviously she was more of a, establishment style player.
Yep.
Trump, has kind of been hit and miss with the Supreme Court justice picks, frankly. Kavanaugh's not that great. Maybe the best one was Gorsuch, maybe. But it's a tough pick, either Kavanaugh or Gorsuch. But regardless, I think that Amy Coney Barrett coming on and testifying about all of these, terrorist activities, I'm sure there's an element of truth to it. I'm sure that her family is being terrorized. I'm sure her kids have suffered these things. But I saw a great contrast between Amy Coney Barrett, in a sense, kind of whining, right? I hate to say that, but in a sense, kind of whining about the problems that she was facing as a result of her position on the Supreme Court versus Clarence Thomas back when George Bush Jr. appointed him. And he said, I would rather die than abandon this process. And he had such, masculine fervor and
Yeah.
manly, stance. He was like, I would rather die than abandon this process. Like, yeah, I'm going through hell right now, but like basically screw you guys. I'm not going anywhere. Like, it was an interesting contrast between
Yeah.
Amy Coney Barrett and then Clarence Thomas. So I do think she was a mistake. I think Trump listened too much to the ivory tower, right wing, the people at the Cato Institute and the people at the Heritage Foundation and all these different entities that claim to be the, think tanks of the administration who have all the answers, who have the true expert take. Those type of people, I think, are the ones that ultimately carry a lot of the blame for,
Yes.
Trump's Supreme Court picks. He should have done what he does in his cabinet, which is pick people he trusts, people who are unconventional. And frankly, all the best picks he's ever made were those style of people, right? People who
Yeah.
ultimately, on paper, if you look at their bio, probably aren't qualified by an institutional standpoint for the job. And yet they're patriotic, trustworthy people. He needs to do that in the future if he has another opportunity to replace a Supreme Court justice. But yeah, no doubt in my mind, Amy Coney Barrett's compromised. But I don't even know if I'd use the word compromise because I don't even ever think she was on our side to begin with. I think it
Yeah.
was just a Trojan.
Yeah. That it's not so much being compromised as the truth coming out.
Yeah,
Um, in reality, I think we probably just need to clone Clarence Thomas and Alito, and we can have
that's
5
right.
Clarence Thomases, 4 Alitos, and just throw everybody else off the court. And we'll just do that in perpetuity. Maybe we'll bring back Scalia for some opinions here and there too. Um,
Yes. I
I
want a
guess
fully
let's.
black Supreme Court.
Yeah,
Just a bunch
exactly.
of
But it's
Clarence
all going to be
Thomases.
Clarence Thomas.
Yeah.
This is perfect. We'll just have him determine what is and is not constitutional, and take all the right cases. All right, well, let's get to at least some good news. Marco Rubio to bring together over 70 nations to combat growing threat of far left terrorism. Let me go ahead and pull the next couple headlines on this too. Um, U.S. government set to expose far left radicalization pipeline leading back to communist Cuba. And guys, Zero Hedge, you guys put together some of the best graphs. I don't know why you put them on your site like the size of a postage stamp, so I can't enlarge them and show them to our audience. It's really unfortunate. But they had a great piece in this article that showed both the funding sources and what leftist organizations were getting the money from Cuba, and in a lot of instances how it was laundered through other NGOs and whatnot to get them the funding for their extremism. But there's even more than that. Trump's Shield of the Americas gains momentum. Colombia set to join. Ecuador deepens U.S. security partnership, and Haiti draws regional attention. So these two stories are somewhat interrelated, and now that Cuba's president, I just blanked on his name, Pedro something or other. Now that he's gone, and we have again a pro-America, pro-South America, pro-Western values president coming in there. South America is really changing right now, and this is an opportunity. This is in our hemisphere. I would much rather be working with them than our previous allies from Europe that now hate us. I would much rather prop up and make America, North and South America, successful countries. We can all close our borders. We can end these cartels, and we can all prosper in this hemisphere. There's a real opportunity for that right now, and I like too. They're building these coalitions to go after these leftist terrorists, not just here but globally.
Yep. Marco Rubio has been doing a good job on a lot of these things recently. And, I do think that there's a better case to be made for the Monroe Doctrine and the securing of the hemisphere. I'm very sympathetic to that. I do think we need to be cautious, though. But
Yeah.
all the while, there was one, I should have sent it to you. I regret not doing it, but I do want to drop it because Marco and his name triggered it. But he is going after the ICC like crazy, the International Criminal Courts. It's
Yes.
basically a wing of the United Nations, an international criminal court of justice that tries international law and nations against war crimes and climate change and all these different things. Marco made a very tremendous statement about the ICC, and he ended it with a very ominous, almost Godfather-esque Michael Corleone statement where he
Uh
said, "We
huh.
will teach the ICC the meaning of American resolve," which was very interesting. Yeah, I think Marco's on the right path on this. I'm thankful for that. I do hope we'll see a resurgence of, more Monroe Doctrine oriented foreign policy, a more America first oriented foreign policy. He's definitely had a little bit of a glow up over the years. I'm hoping it's genuine. Not tons of reasons to think it isn't. Well, maybe
Yeah.
there are. Maybe another episode for another day. But yeah, good work all around.
Yeah, and I would agree. He's somebody that's really impressed me. I really wonder if this rumor that's been circulating for years now is that, he felt like he got burned by the deep state numerous times in the Senate. And after he saw what happened in 2020, that's when he got closer to Trump, and that, it changed his perspective on a lot of things. But, the other thing I want to bring up here, especially regarding all of these shifts where suddenly the socialists and the communists in South America can't win elections to save their lives, is, others have pointed out all this USAID funding that dried up that was going to a lot of their surrogates, was funding these political revolutions for the left all over the globe. That money's gone, and now all of a sudden they can't win a race to save their life. Brazil is really the only major country left in South America that still is essentially run by communists, literally and figuratively. With Lula and with this other, I always forget their Supreme Court guy or judge that basically just does whatever he wants and pretends it's law. The one that wants Bolsonaro locked up for life and is going after his son right now too.
Right.
Yeah,
this is it Morez? Alexander de Morez?
Yeah.
Like that?
Yep. Yeah. They don't have their funding either there. And the next Brazilian election is not for a few years, but I have a feeling that Bolsonaro or somebody from the freedom movement will win, and maybe will actually expose this fraud in their elections, which, again, they had the same thing happen there. It happened to us. You had electronic voting systems all over the country where the result they spit out doesn't seem to reflect what the way the people voted. I mean, there were entire villages that showed no votes for Bolsonaro that were key bases of his support there, including a lot of native, almost a Native American, but native lands like out in the jungles, out in the Amazon, that were voting and supporting Bolsonaro, but showed no votes for him. So I really do have to wonder if taking down this USAID, this money laundering slush fund for the left, if that's not something that's had great influence in all these positive changes we've seen across North and South America.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and while you were talking there, I was just reminding myself of some of the connections between South American communists and the United States and the State Department. It really has been up until Trump, just the matter of course for the United States to basically lock arms with Lula da Silva, who is certainly a proxy of the communist Chinese in the region. There's no doubt about it, and to basically go along with the communist agenda to take over the Panama Canal, take over Latin America, use that as a footstool to be able to then creep into the United States. That has been the policy. So going after, with, of course, the standout of Argentina, that's always kind of been a more of a bastion of liberty down there by comparison. But Trump's, course correction on this with going after, what was his name? Venezuela guy.
Maduro.
Maduro. Yeah, going after Maduro and really snubbing Lula in many ways. These are big statements, and I do think that it's important that we recognize that while somebody like me who's very much against foreign intervention, I'm not a huge fan of the war in Iran, definitely not a fan of the war in Ukraine, all that stuff. There is a big significance to Latin America in particular, and I think by an extension Cuba, because the communist Chinese are literally trying to take it over. And can you imagine a world where the communist Chinese are literally just, right
isolated
to our south, and we are then completely surrounded? That is not a good situation. Honestly, I think there's a really good case to be made for keeping regional hegemony with the Monroe Doctrine for the Americas and taking over Greenland so that we have that northern access point to be able to reach the east. I think both of those things are significant, and I think Trump really wants that. He's just trying to figure out how to crack that nut politically to be able to access it. But when he goes to North Dakota and he's standing in front of Teddy Roosevelt and he's talking about the Panama Canal and all these things, and everything, I think Trump is very much a expander. He's a nationalist. He wants to be known for acquiring land. I think he would salivate at the idea of acquiring Greenland, controlling South America. And I do think that is a righteous desire.
Yeah, because to be honest, even getting Maduro, again, I'm largely going to be against foreign intervention, but there are
Right.
times where it makes sense. And again, we're not talking like this was no occupation or anything else like the left and the media were trying to present it as. I mean, this was I just heard somebody say that it was shorter than a football game. You know, less than 2 hours. It was shorter than a Michael Bay movie. You know, we were in and out. Grab this dictator who was flooding our country with drugs and fentanyl, a close ally to China, propping up Russia. A whole variety of crimes against the United States, and that's not even to get into potentially involved in election interference. I guess hopefully we'll hear more about that on Thursday, because I remember we've had him in jail here for months now, and Maduro looks like a squealer to me. He looks like somebody that would definitely cut a deal and give us whatever we wanted, especially considering we flew in a bunch of helicopter gunships, hit them with the discombobulator, and basically just had our way with their country for 2 hours, and we did it without taking any no casualties. Yes, some U.S. servicemen were injured, were shot by their air defense system, but no actual casualties taken. I mean, you could not have a better military operation.
That's
Um,
right.
and that's what we have to remember. Like, this is protecting our backyard. We can't have China staging things on our border. I mean, I think really we got to start worrying about Canada and their relationship with China too. Maybe it's time to build a northern border wall too. Um, I guess after Alberta secedes and becomes the 51st state, then we'll build a wall around it. But yeah, I mean, I think protecting our own backyard is what's important. It's very clear Europe, in a lot of ways, is turned against us and turned against their own people. And I just don't really see that reversing, especially after, I don't know if you're familiar with this. I don't have a thing written up for it, but, they just passed. Well, didn't even pass. It didn't have enough votes to pass, but the EU is going to implement this. Um, what do you call it? Online Security Act again, even though they didn't even have the votes for it. That Ursula von der Leyen apparently just wants to spy on you and control what you're doing so much. She couldn't even get the votes for that. It's failed. I think it was 5 different times. They failed to get the votes to push this next phase of it through. But they're, I guess, just going to do it anyway. I guess having an MEP doesn't actually mean anything there. They're just going to do what they want, whatever the security state wishes. That'll be what moves forward there. And again, this is why we need to do things to actually enshrine our freedom, protect ourselves from government here in America once again.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree more.
Yeah. Well, I guess we're about out of time here, so let's wrap this up. And I got one last story here I want to get to that California reports case of explosive diarrhea parasite as officials warn of larger outbreak. Man, and you want to Taco Bell was hit with this story yesterday too. Apparently, they were recipients of this lettuce, and you could not have a worse marketing thing for Taco Bell than explosive diarrhea parasites. But I guess this is restaurants all over the country were hit by this supplier and these parasites coming out or getting through, I should say. But so far, I think it's just at restaurants. I'm double checking right now that it hasn't shown up in any retail. Walmarts or anything like that. But man, what an unfortunate story.
It is, and this is maybe a wake up call for Americans to just say goodbye to Taco Bell for good. I know that
Yeah.
you like hitting it up, Michael. I haven't been in a long time. I'm more of a Chick-fil-A or Culver's guy myself. Maybe throw a little steak and shake in there. But
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, crazy, crazy. Maybe if people, took a little bit more care in what they ate, we wouldn't have as many of these parasite issues. But hey, it's just part of the game, and hopefully people, still get their Taco Bell and don't have to pay too high of a price for it.
Yeah, yeah. But for the time being, don't make any runs to the border. And I mean, both at Taco Bell or to our border, because we'll throw you out. Um, all right, Andrew, any words of wisdom you want to leave our audience with before we wrap up?
Yeah, absolutely. Take this, conversation and have it with somebody else, right? Always be talking with our neighbors. We need to be in America that talks to one another again. I'm sick and tired of, going into a diner, going to a coffee shop, everyone's staring at their phones. Like, we need to be able to talk about issues, talk about our country. So be extroverted. Have a political conversation with somebody once or twice a day, or maybe just a few times a week. Set a goal, go out, have a conversation with somebody. Maybe you won't change their mind, but you never know what's going to happen when you get somebody to think, when you get somebody to articulate what they believe. There's a great impact for you in that, and there's a great impact for them. And I think, as Charlie Kirk taught us, if we can go out and talk with people, have good-hearted conversations, we can rest assured that our country does have a chance at a future. But it's when we don't talk to each other, it's when we isolate, it's when we stay online and just read things we agree with and never actually, share it with others or converse. That is when we get into a very, very hostile and volatile state. We need to have constant comms with one another, even those we disagree with. I personally try to talk with people I disagree with. Mostly it's within the context of the right, but we're still talking, we're still conversing, we're still sparring over issues we disagree with. And I'm constantly trying to listen to people I disagree with on podcasts. So all that to say, long-winded final thought, but exit the echo chamber. Doesn't mean you forsake your principles or thoughts. On the contrary, you do the opposite. You harden them, you ossify them, but you share it with others. You get out there, you have conversations with your friends, have conversations with your family about issues. And I think the cascading effect of that will be extraordinarily positive, not just for you or them, but for the country.
Exactly. Well said. And remember, guys, we're not talking to our neighbors. How are we going to know who to put in the gulags when we finally do seize total control of the country and implement our secret plan? Wink, wink. All right, Andrew, thanks again for joining us here today. To our audience, thank you for being here. Please like, share, and subscribe. Help us to grow so we can bring more people the news the mainstream media doesn't want you to hear. I'll be back tomorrow with even more. Oh, no, sorry. Actually, wait, tomorrow is tomorrow's Thursday. Yeah, sorry. So tomorrow, guys, I won't be on air. I have an appointment in the morning. I can't move, so we'll be skipping that, but I will be back on Friday. So thanks again, guys.